Our discussion is going to be centered on the theme, New Age Management Standing Up to the Test. So innovation and innovative management systems in the context of today's organizations is at the center of this theme that we have for you today. Innovation is an often used word in the corporate parlance. We keep on talking about it. In fact, in today's competitive environment, the organizations want to differentiate themselves on their innovation quotient. However, whenever we talk about innovation, we talk about it in the context of products, in the context of technologies, or sometimes in the context of processes. But management is also a very important component of any business environment, correct? But there are very few times when we really talk about innovating in the term of management systems. And that is at the central of the theme that we have for discussion today. Over the past 2 decades, we have seen a lot of changes in the business environment. Right from the way the organizations are formed, to the way organizations are structured, to the way they operate their business, as also the business models that they adopt. Everything is increasingly becoming very unorthodox, very agile, very innovative. But in spite of this new paradigm, many of the management methods and techniques that we follow are not current. They are largely the ones that have been developed much earlier, when the ecosystem was very different. So these are some of the aspects that we want to explore with our panel of experts today. So we just wanted to work around some questions like, how can we innovate in our management techniques to deliver better business outcomes? What do successful companies really do? Or what are the policies and techniques that they adopt to succeed? What can management practitioners do to innovate how they manage? So with this context, I would like to introduce the panel that we have today. So we have Ankit Nagori, our first panelist. I would like to welcome Ankit. Ankit is the co-founder of CureFit Healthcare Private Limited. Ankit graduated from IIT Guwahati and founded a couple of startups in the advertising and the social media marketing space. Ankit joined Flipkart in early 2010 and played a leading role in launching and scaling key businesses such as fashion and marketplace. In his last role at Flipkart, Ankit managed the entire P&L and as a chief business officer. Ankit is very active in the startup community as an angel investor, and he's an advisor to some of the early stage startups. So a warm welcome to you, Ankit. The second panelist that I would like to invite here is Shrikant Gopalakrishnan. So Shrikant is the Vice President IoT. He is the Vice President IoT Digital Enterprise Assets at SAP Labs. Shrikant has worked in multiple domains, ranging from human capital management to banking. He has over 22 years of software industry experience. He has a bachelor's degree in engineering from the National Institute of Technology, Tiruchirappalli. He is also a master's in engineering from Southern Illinois University. Both the names are very difficult, Shrikant. I just had to practice. Both Tiruchirappalli and Illinois. I hope I pronounced it right. Shrikant possesses an executive management degree from IIM Bangalore. So a warm welcome to you, Shrikant. And Shrikant also, like every other Indian, is a huge cricket fan. And he was fortunate to interview his icon, Rahul Dravid. I think he did interview Rahul Dravid. Yeah, a big wow. Then our third panelist is Radha Srinivas, who is the director of LinkedIn. Unfortunately, Radha has got caught up in traffic, something that worried us last night, but we have to face it. But however, she promises to be here in the next 5 or 10 minutes. But I thought I will just introduce her so that we know as and when she comes and joins us. So Radha holds an electrical engineering degree from the University of Rochester. She pursued an MBA in marketing and strategy from Yale School of Management. She brings with her strong domain experience spanning more than 12 years of work across human resources, marketing, and business development. At LinkedIn, Radha heads the team that provides strategic business partnership to the India business. So Radha will soon join us as and when she's able to make it to the venue. And we have our fourth panelist here is Abraham Cherian. Abraham is the head of HR for Technology Unit of Tesco Bengaluru. And Abraham, along with the applause, you also need, a big thank you to you for being the sponsors of this track. So Tesco has sponsored the Management Excellence track. Prior to this, Abraham was country head for retail operations at Malaysia. He holds more than 2 decades of experience in the HR space. Abraham is a law graduate with an MBA in HR from the Pune University. So Abraham is from the same town as me. So warm welcome to you, Abraham. A Punite on this panel. And then, of course, I can't finish the line of introductions without introducing the lady of the day, Vasudha Verma. So Vasudha has chaired the Management Excellence track this year for Grace Hopper Conference, and she is going to be the lady who is going to moderate the panel for us today. Vasudha, I welcome you on the stage. Okay. So Vasudha has proven expertise in managing projects and programs for cross-cultural teams. Vasudha graduated from Bangalore University with majors in physics, followed by professional communication from Carleton University, Canada. Vasudha is, as I said, well known in the GHC circle. She's a well-known name. She has been contributing to GHC in several capacities as a speaker, as a committee member, and a co-chair. And like I said, she was the chair for the Management Excellence track this year, along with Mamta Kolpe, who is our other chair. Over to you, Vasudha.
Thank you, Sushma, for the warm welcome and the introductions. It's really nice to be here. Somebody in the earlier panel discussion said, oh, wow, there's all just women. And look what you see on the dais here. Am I really the odd woman out here? We are, like Sushma said, talking about what we can do in terms of managing innovation just from not just a technology perspective, but from people, process, and projects, and also being entrepreneurial. So each of our panelists brings in that set of expertise, and I hope this is going to be a very enriching session for all of you. But before we start with the actual Q&A, I would like a show of hands on how many of you here are individual contributors. Great. A show of hands on how many of you are team leads. Okay. Managers? Great. Senior managers and above? Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would also request 5 volunteers. Please stand up. It's a very brief task that I have for you. Won't take more than 30 seconds, so don't be scared. Can we have 5 volunteers? Please stand up. Great, I love the spirit of volunteering. I want each of you to just give me in about 10 or 15 seconds what you would like to carry back as a takeaway from this session.
Hi, I'm Nandini from Intel. I have been successful in whatever I'm doing, but I feel like innovation is something I could achieve more on whatever I'm doing. So since you talked about innovation, I would love to do. I would love to learn on how more I can contribute towards innovation. Thank you.
So what I want to take back from this session is, see, again, the management fundas and everything around the world is changing. It's moving towards more people and technology together and collaboration. So that's what I am looking forward to, that what are the new age fundas that the new breeding talent and the leadership can take away from this session.
Hi, my name is Soumya. I'm from Symantec. I would like to reflect more upon how we can look ahead, go back, and look for more opportunities, how to for horizontal growth within the same role. like some input points, if we can, like what would help us to come up with more challenging roles by ourselves if we don't have it in our current role currently, how to vision that and then work towards it.
Hi, I'm Moitri. I'm from Dell EMC. So, as we all know, Dell has recently acquired EMC. So, it's a very dynamic environment for us. It's very difficult time for both the companies with all the changes. So, yes, I'm here looking at how we can make use of the current opportunities available or the current job role. In the current job role, how can I make it even more interesting and more innovative? That's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, ladies.
Hi, I'm Neha. I'm also from HSBC. What I'm basically looking from this session is, some kind of interaction with the team members, which is based on emotional resilience. You understand, the things that they are going through, and not just, the things that you're asked to do. Yeah, because for the senior management. So, how can I balance between, the senior management ask and what my team is, really going through?
Thank you, Neha. We have an exclusive session on emotional resilience.
Oh, okay.
Please
Sure, I'll check it.
check the schedule, and that's going to be an interesting one as well. Thank you.
It is actually at 1:30, Neha.
Sure.
I just want to check this.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing what you're looking forward to from here. And let me dive straight away into some of the questions that I have for our panelists. So we spoke about transformation, and I think Maitreyi spoke about this change that comes into an organization, especially in a situation where there's a merger stroke acquisition or a buyout. And Ankit has been in that situation more than once. So this kind of transformation, what would you have to say in terms of how does management become more innovative in a situation like this?
Thanks, Vasudha. So, if you look at all the different scenarios, whether it's a merger and acquisition or a slump sale, these are three different circumstances. Sometimes companies are selling because they're not doing well and a bigger company is acquiring them. In that case, when the company which is being acquired, there's a lot of insecurity because there is a perception that the company is not doing well and a bigger company or a competitor has bailed them out. In such a situation, sometimes there's confusion about the future of the jobs, and it leads to a lot of attrition right before and after the acquisition. The second situation is where the things were going well, two companies which are doing well come together for a much larger alliance. Something like what happened with Flipkart and Myntra a few years back. I think in the previous one, it's difficult to create a positive environment. Even if you talk positive, if you show some positive signs, employees tend to move out very quickly, thinking about that the bigger company will have a lot more advantage, etc. But in a case where the companies which are doing well come together, I think a lot of management assurance is required on both sides, because there will be a lot of overlap of jobs. There will be people on both sides doing similar stuff and making sure that they all know that their jobs are secure. I think in the first 3 to 6 months are very, very important, from hand-holding each employee on both sides, a lot of communication. Like there's no amount of communication which is enough. I think reinforcing through verbal communications, all hands, town halls, through all kinds of posters in the office about why the acquisition happened, what is the objective of both the companies, how will it be beneficial for employees, what does it mean for the stakeholders and investors. I think this is what it will all be about. If I have to think about the difference between a successful integration versus an unsuccessful integration, if the founders or the management of the companies are not aligned, it will never make sense. But if the management and the founders are aligned, then it would go through. And more often than not, it would be like a tumultuous thing in the beginning, but towards the end of the 6 to 12 months, people will start seeing that it was a beneficial thing, and people will start aligning their strategies.
So in a nutshell, Ankit, you're saying that there's going to be best practices in every situation and in every organization, and these best practices that are brought to the table should possibly be evaluated and merged, so managers are well informed and it's a give and take situation.
Right. I think I agree with what you just said, and I think it's all only about identifying why did the companies come together. There must have been some positives on both sides. Identifying the positives and reinforcing them every now and then would be the most important thing.
Thank you, Ankit. I'm going to move to Abraham as a continuation of what we've said. So, not just a merger and acquisition scenario, but in your own organization, which is 95 years young. How does this versatility come in? And how does an organization try to refocus on leadership, in a changing business environment? And, we just had this previous face-off on managing across different generations. So how do you bring that perspective and look at developing leaders straight from probably, the time they're out of college and get into their first jobs right through the various generations? And in the process create a nice, diverse ambience where everybody contributes, not just to themselves, but to the organizations as well.
So I think it's one of the biggest challenge which organizations face, considering that there is so much happening in the marketplace. Things are changing all the time. Companies are trying to do different things to be relevant in the marketplace. There is always somebody who is disrupting things. And then, of course, there are a lot of unknown factors which hit, like the recent decisions from the government has actually hit a lot of people unaware on how to react. So therefore, this is going to be the norm, right? So there will be something which will always disrupt things. On the other hand, companies are also trying to be relevant. So they are introducing new things, new changes, they are trying to venture out into new geographies, and all this brings new dimensions of challenge with respect to managing people, right? So, so the question, of course, in everybody's mind is how do we educate our managers to also be relevant in the new changed dynamics of the marketplace? And I think there is no one formula which fits all. The companies will have to keep innovating. They will have to keep looking at different aspects and try to bring in different changes. So, for example, even in our organization, when we simply try to build capabilities, so every organization wants to build capability. So when we said we are going to build capability, there were questions asked by some people saying that, oh my God, what does that mean? Am I not going to be fitting in the new, changed environment? Is my capability going to be inadequate? And then suddenly those managers had a new challenge to face as to what do I tell these people? Some of them may absolutely not fit into that environment, but that's not always true. So, so therefore, my answer to that is not one solution will fit all. I think organizations will have to keep looking at the situation in hand and react to that.
So, as a HR professional yourself, are you looking at various new models that could enhance this capability building and in terms of developing leadership strategies as well?
Yeah, we always look for that, and we don't stick to one. We are always innovating and we are always improving upon it. And I think that's what organizations will have to do. And that's the only way they can remain relevant to face the market.
Thank you, thank you. I'm going to now extend this question to Srikanth. And you are a hardcore technology person who happens to be in management, right? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for agreeing. And when we look at a situation like this, how would you evaluate the caliber of the business leaders and the team leaders, and in terms of assessing what are the current needs and what could be the potential needs in the future?
Sure. So, as you said, a technologist, and so I'll come with a technology example. just to give you a sense of the impact that disruptive innovation is starting to interrupt our lives in more ways than one. So I was actually working with a company based in Europe that does certifications. So if you went up an elevator or you had an automobile, there are companies that come in and do a certification that lasts for 6 months. There's a date that is against it. A 6-month repetition of that happens, etc. So now we've got this whole concept of IoT, right? So every particular piece of equipment is going to have a sensor. There's going to be a monitoring of the operation and the condition of each piece of equipment, minute by minute, second by second, whatever the frequency of the transmission is. So what does a company that does certification do? Are they even relevant anymore? There's no need for a certification that needs to happen on a periodic basis. But the important part is that company did realize that their business model is essentially going to become obsolete. That's the world that we're living in. Manufacturing is starting to change. I'll give you another example. I mean, the quote that I have is actually with the textile industry, garment industry. So if you look at the garment industry in particular today, it's all mass manufactured. So there is this advent of 3D printing. Now you can actually 3D print clothes. So what companies are starting to do is they're getting to a model of personalized clothing, which means you go on some kind of a portal, pick a design, pick the kind of material you want, a local print zone will print it for you. That completely disrupts retail. So we're talking about changes that have to come into every organization on a regular basis. And for that, I think expecting that this change is going to happen top down is a very foolish mindset. Because we talked about it in the previous panel in terms of saying that the millennials have exposure to a lot of these things much more than people who've been in the business a long time. In fact, all of us are on the same page, whether it's a millennial or somebody with 20 years of experience. We're unlearning what we've learned to be able to be relevant in today's world. And given that particular scenario, I think we have to all start on an even keel. And to me, we have people with experience who come with a maturity that helps them handle situations. It doesn't mean they are the best people to make the decisions. I think it's a very big fundamental difference that we need to be looking at. So my philosophy is basically allow people to have that creative release in whatever fashion they want it to be in. And once you start to do that, you start to realize it's better for us to just keep out of the way and only intervene when you want certain direction to happen in terms of achieving the end goal. So the role of a manager becomes a mentor, the role of a manager becomes a facilitator, the role of a manager becomes allowing that person to gain the exposure needed to come up with the ideation that's important. That's innovation, that's creativity, and that's exactly what I see managers doing in the future. So that's my 2 pieces.
Thank you, Shrikant. I'm just reminded of something that would happen often when I was in school. Probably Shrikant and I belong to the same generation. So I don't know if it happens now. How many of you have heard a teacher scream, you know, "What do you think? This is a fish market?" Great, I have company, so I don't have to feel bad. So I use that analogy to just talk about this word disruption. And it seems to be like the buzzword and a good word too to talk about in the current business scenario. And who else could be a better role model for this concept than the person sitting on my right? So Ankit, I have this question for you in terms of, in this so-called disruption or disruptive business scenario and a technology scenario, do you think traditional ways of managing things will work, or is there a new way of thinking about disruption? And can you also share some examples, please?
Sure. So maybe a quick show of hands. How many of you use Ola and Uber? And e-commerce, Flipkart, Amazon, Snapdeal. So Imagine asking this question 4-5 years back. There would have been no one using Ola, and Uber didn't exist in India back then. Flipkart was like a very small company. Just examples of how people adapt to change. A new concept came, it made life simpler, and we may call it disruption, but it's just making things easier for people. Anything which makes things easier, more efficient, more practical, people will move towards that. So nothing, it's not different for any company, any set of people, teams inside the company. If there is any business philosophy, process, product, which is getting better, people just need to understand from the first principles of any decision making that whether it's useful or not, and it just makes the overall, thought about disruption much easier. I think a lot gets talked about innovation, disruption, and all of these are like, very highly used terms in today's time where people just, feel that innovation is something which you have to pursue as a separate track. It's a constant endeavor. If whatever processes are being followed, you just need to make sure that you start doing that process in a much better way, making use of all the technology and tools which are available to you. So technology and tooling inside the company is something which is evolving very fast. A lot of companies, 20 years back were not using SAP, are now using SAP. SAP, for example, is now coming up with better solutions for even SMEs. So just small examples of how small companies are adapting technology. I feel internet today is where IT and ITES was 15, 20 years back. Industries, all companies have an accounting system, they have a inventory management system, so on and so forth. And likewise, now they have an internet-enabled sales systems. People are selling online, people can list their products online, they can do online payments. Most of us in this room must be using very little cash for the last few years, not just because of the current demonetization, but because you've been using cards, wallets, Paytm, etc. for years now, right? So it just shows that all businesses, all managers, all employees in the companies will move to a technology solution if it's made easily available and easy to use. And all these technology disruptions also inside big IT companies, big technology companies are also happening at a large scale now, because people realize that humans should actually add a lot more value on the emotional side of things, on making sure that the algorithms are right, and the daily repetition of all of those processes should be done by machine, system, robots in future. And we can keep calling it disruption or innovation, but it's just constant improvement of how business is done. And when you zoom out 5-10 years, you think a lot of disruption has happened, but on a daily basis, it's just constant improvement.
Thanks, Ankit. I want to just...
Sorry to interrupt. We have Radha here. Radha has made it. Welcome to you, Radha.
Thank you. I'm sorry, everyone. Combination of being a mom with a sick kid, having employee issues first thing in the morning, and then Bangalore traffic was really rough. So I apologize, but I'm really happy to be here today, and so forgive me for the delay.
Thank you, Radha, for making it. Can somebody from the front row bring that placard and place it here, please? The tent card, yes. Thank you. So, Ankit, we were talking about disruption in a nice way, and we were also talking about a cashless economy, and also about the various algorithms and the mathematics that go into managing businesses. But do you see this as a new way of thinking, and does it also mean that some of the traditional methods are still there, but we've made it more agile and more mathematical in a sense?
Sure. See, traditional methods, again, it's very difficult to classify anything as traditional and new. There would have been processes which are already, processes, systems, etc., which are already working at scale and efficiently, and those should have been retained, are still running. And then there would be cases where we figure out that older systems and processes don't work because it's just some disguised unemployment, because 10 people are working on same set of things which a computer or a machine or algorithm can take care of. So the summary is that there would be enough examples in the organization where there are processes which were built long back and are still good, and they are termed as traditional maybe, and then there are technologies and processes and newer systems, analytics, which makes things easier, and they're termed as new age. But anything which is built to last and to scale will suffice. So a lot of sales processes in FMCG have been there for years, and people continue to use that because there is no other way of going and making a sale. But in a B2B environment, while they can be aided with technology, they can be aided with tools, IoT, etc., but there is a human interaction involved. But in the case of B2C, where consumers are sitting across the country, internet has come in where people don't need to step out and so on and so forth. So there will be a combination of processes which were built long back and still scaling and are much needed, and that's how the balance would be.
Thank you, Ankit. So I'm going to move over to Shrikant now, and we just spoke about some of these legacy systems and agility and disruption. But does that mean that these kind of processes are really not restricted only to product management? And has it also brought in some kind of a new process in the way we think about businesses? And also, does it mean a paradigm shift in the way things like this have gone beyond technology and gotten into management practices as well?
Sure. So I'll take this question in two parts. Okay, I'll address the product management angle to this. Right. I mean, the way I look at it, I don't think a developer is a developer anymore, or cannot afford to be just a developer anymore. I think in the previous panel I heard things about there was fancy designations is one part. But there was a talk about saying, should I be working on this technology or that technology, etc. So to me, I think it's very, very important if anybody is in the technology field to be well-rounded. So they have to have a mindset that understands technology. They need to have a mindset in terms of what the business expects out of that technology or what you can do with that technology. Because technology alone is not going to fetch you anything. Okay, it's about the application of the technology, and it's not just that somebody is sitting in some room in a corner that's going to tell you what to do with the technology, but it's you down there working on the code that needs to figure out what's the business applicability of this. And so to me, people have to morph into saying, I know the technology, here are the business scenarios I'm researching, and what can I apply this to? And a combination of these is what is going to fetch you the final outcome. And the reason I stress on that so much is primarily because, we have our hackathons, we have, I've gone out there and seen a bunch of them. There are a lot of ideas, but the applicability of it has to be business-minded. It has to have an end result that actually is going to be, I would say, sellable or usable in some fashion. Okay, if you don't get to that point, the technology and whatever product you're building is completely useless. So that is the mindset change on the product management side. So your second question was really, can you? Yeah, sure. So again, I think I'll give an example of what we're trying to do within SAP, but it's applicable to every other company as well. So one of the things we are realizing is it's much easier to actually recruit somebody from a university and put them on going on this transformative journey than helping people unlearn something and be able to put them on the same job. Okay? But the challenges that we have in terms of that creativity and the creative release that they need. Remember, 80% of your job is still going to be mundane. Okay, it's your day-to-day grind that you need to go through. It's not like every moment of your life in a technology company is exciting, right? So where do you give them the opportunity to be able to experiment? I think it's very, very important. So what we started was saying, there are so many people in the company who actually want to develop and want to basically work with newer technology, newer gadgets, whatever be it, right? And we set up something called Blue, which is a crowdsourcing platform that allows anybody in the company, it doesn't matter which level you are in, I can put forth an idea, get 4 or 5 like-minded people to work with me, and then make a pitch to a panel of people within the company to say if this can become a product. So what we are trying to do is evolve that fire in the belly, the creative urge in people into something that can be beneficial for the company. And this is how large organizations can behave like startups. Because eventually that's what we all need to get to. Because with the changes that are happening on a day-to-day basis, that's the goal that all organizations need to be heading towards. That's my...
Thank you, Shrikant. Thank you. Do we have students here, student scholars in the audience? No? Okay. Millennials? Great. So the gentleman on the left is somebody you should look forward to talking to when we step out. Remember, he spoke about a platform that he has set up. So we spoke about in the earlier panel discussion, and I think Abraham also brought in this perspective. We're looking at adding skills and growing laterally, so you know who to talk to. Thank you. I'm going to move over to Radha. Radha, we spoke about disruption. We spoke about expanding a defined or a predefined role beyond a certain skill set. For example, we spoke about product managers and how they should get involved in business. But tell me what companies can do in terms of being resilient enough to this, and also from a people management perspective, how is this going to help reinvent some of the people management practices in an agile business environment like this?
Sure. So a couple of thoughts on that. One, I think it's just the basic recognition that you can't really be so super specialized as to the point that you miss the bigger picture of other things that are going on. So for instance, in the past, a programmer's only job would be to develop code. But nowadays our ask of programmers is to say, hey, you need to know, not only do you know to develop, you need to understand how to test, you need to understand the business implications of what you're trying to actually do. And then as you grow in your career, you need to actually, you know, when you become a manager, you still need to have and retain your technical edge. At least that's the kind of stuff that, you know, folks at LinkedIn care about. We don't have leaders, for instance, who don't have a very strong hand within the technology and who continue to provide technical guidance. So if you think of just evolution of skill set, there is specialization, but then there's also this general well-informed set of things that you need to know so you can be in a good groove with the rest of the ecosystem. You just can't be only, like you can't be just tunnel vision about what you do. So from people practices, that poses an interesting challenge because it's really hard to now suddenly produce a whole group of people who are just these perfect all-rounders in all aspects. So how do you develop that? I think it's a problem lots of people are wrestling with because it also has implications on how you drive learning in your organization, how do you drive progression in your organization, how do you build an agile team that can actually come together, disband, do things that are not commanded by normal hierarchies that you would normally have associated with big organizations or even organizations that have been around for a while. So some of the things, for instance, that we look at is we actively talk to our employees about tours of duty. I would say, you know, traditional organizations, you would talk a lot about your career as a jungle gym, as a ladder. We talk about our careers as jungle gyms. So if you know the difference, like those of you who've ever been to a playground, you know what a jungle gym looks like, right? Like you clamber all over the place and you try different things. Sometimes you go up, sometimes you go down, sometimes you go across. In a sort of a previous world or a before world, it would be pretty much you'd go up, 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 and stay, and then go up, up, up again. Well, that's not relevant anymore, and that's not the best way to build that comprehensive skill set. So we have conversations called tours of duty with our employees where we really talk about what are you trying to get out of this particular tour of duty? What are you getting out of this stint? And then what do you want to do after that? And it's really driven by employees to say where they want to go. So people, for instance, can one day be working as an engineer, Tomorrow, they might want to try their hand in business development or business operations. The next time around, they might want to switch into the business analytics side of the house. And then if they haven't lost their technical edge or are willing to reinvest some time getting back into their technology, they can switch right back into the technical stream. So we're trying to keep a very agile workforce with these very active conversations built into our system.
Thank you, Radha. I have a question for the audience. How many of you have changed jobs within the organization? Great, so you have your answer here. I'm going to move I'm going to ask Abraham to share his thoughts on this kind of a competitive advantage, and we're looking at continuous changes in an organization, and also as from a people perspective, Radha just shared about, you can be an engineer, you can be, probably a business analyst, or somebody that's good with algorithms and, be an analytics person. So this is kind of the agility of the individual to be able to adapt oneself to the various roles built on one's own skills. But what can organizations do to quickly align and realign and make some course corrections if needed, if there's a situation like this with a particular group of employees, especially high-performing employees who would definitely be an asset to the organization?
Yeah, I mean, very often I've seen organizations have, or people working in the organizations saying that they are unclear about where their career is going. Do you agree? So sometimes this is also driven by the fact that there is not enough information provided to them or available to them to navigate their journey through different roles and different paths, and what is it that I need to develop. Sometimes it's also not known. And organizations are, in a way, responsible for creating that gap between what they are looking for in an individual and what is the individual expected to do. So I think there is a need for every organization to really look at this aspect of what kind of capability do I need in this organization for the future, and how do I communicate that with people and connect it with the opportunities that are available and make your policies drive some of those things. So this is a big connect that in many organizations sometimes it just gets broken. And then there is dissatisfaction and so many other things just follow. So in our organization, for example, we have tried to relook at the changed paradigm and therefore relook at the competencies and skills needed for people to exist for the future. So we are in the process of doing that, and we are constantly seeking feedback from the people as to what is it that they would like to hear from us to help them. And one constant feedback that we have kept receiving is that we would like to have a much more transparent way of knowing what are some of the things that different roles are required to have, so that we can then start developing some of those things. And I think even if I take this discussion to a larger context of Tesco, which is typically a retail organization with 5 million people working in stores, there is that individual standing there serving customers who typically do not have a laptop or a desktop in front of him. How do you connect with those kind of people? Because there is aspirations among them, and they also want to do different things in life. They also want to grow into different roles. They also have to have this desire to develop themselves. So then it kind of opens up a different challenge of even having a platform to communicate. So we are looking at technology in a big way to make some of those connects happen. And so that, because I think one of the things that has also happened is people are now very savvy about technology. So earlier generations probably struggled with some of those things. Now everybody has a smartphone. They are doing their business with smartphone. And so organizations like ours are now looking at how do I tap that particular gadget available in the hands of the person to even send these kind of signals out.
Thank you. So I have a question again for the audience. How many of you have regular one-on-ones with your managers? Great. How many of you have annual performance appraisals? Great. So do these questions come up as part of those discussions? It's just a simple yes or no answer. We don't want to get into the details because, you know, who would want to talk about their manager, right? So show of hands, please. Has your organization enabled you and has your manager enabled you in terms of the move that you want, the skill sets that you want? Just a show of hands. Great, thank you. For those that did not put your hand up, I have nothing to say. You can always have offline discussions with our panelists. I'm just a moderator. So Shrikant, if you scan the horizon today, and you are able to look at something that could be a potential issue or a problem, like what we call a tomorrow's problem, what is something that, as a manager, one can do to quickly identify that? And as an organization, what should the organization do to start anticipating what could be the potential resolution for this issue, and how does an organization go about it?
If I understood your question right, I mean,
It's a problem solution scenario.
Problem solution scenario. Okay, that's fine. Okay, so I think in terms of providing some kind of growth for employees, I mean, typically, like I said, the role of a manager is going to be a mentor, a guide, and at the same time, stepping out of the way when manager has nothing to offer. I think that's a very important criteria that managers need to understand. So, having said that, I think in terms of problem resolutions, it's not a parent-child relationship with your employees. You're not going to basically sit there and say, do this. Okay? I think it needs to be a more collaborative effort. And I think most companies, I think there was a reference to continuous interactions between managers and employees, right? So to me, that is an interaction session that is going to collectively come with a resolution. And in terms of growth prospects that the employee wants, I firmly believe that everybody needs to have a career development plan. And the career development plan is owned by the employee, not by the manager. If you're expecting the manager to be prescriptive, you've completely lost the plot already. Okay? You have to be able to tell your manager, guide your manager, saying, help me, this is what I want. And if you don't have that clarity of thought, there are enough resources that are available in today's world that you can tap into. I mean, we already have close to 200 apps, if not more, on our mobile phones, right? There are enough resources available that can guide you to saying, exploring what you want to do for your future. So figure out what you want to do for your future. Figure out if the place you are in is going to offer you those, or figure out what your options are. Believe me, you have to own this process. You have to own the problem resolution. And a lot of times we kind of look up and say, the organization is not doing something for me. But half of the problem lies with you. It takes two to clap. And my firm observation is any problem resolution needs to have in a collaborative manner, and career development and building is something that needs to happen together with people that can offer you the advice that is needed. But it's owned by you.
Thank you, Shrikant. So, just extending Shrikant's thoughts, Ankit, what do you think could be the next management breakthrough?
Sure. So, you spoke about the annual appraisal cycles and the one-on-ones, right? So, I think in a lot of companies, what I've observed, and in fact, my previous company also, a lot of managers wait for the cycle to come up to give feedback. A lot of managers wait for that meeting to happen to give feedback. Sometimes having those difficult conversations, vice versa, is very difficult. So I think it's because of the relationship between the manager and the employee. The manager-employee relationship itself is not the right relationship if it's about the career development. It has to be more like a coach and a coachee thing. If you imagine a sports coach, right? He won't wait, and if there's a tennis player and he has a flaw in his technique, he won't wait for the Wimbledon to get over and to give feedback that, you know what, you're not playing well, and this is what you should do for the next Wimbledon. While the game is on, and not only in like after the match, in football, in other sports, they give feedback right during the game. So that's the kind of relationship, you know, which the world has to move to. Like the world is moving to real time, just in time kind of, you know, mindset. And the coaching also cannot, you know, be once a year or twice a year or even once a week. As and when people see any development areas, any areas for improvement, any areas where the person is doing well, the feedback has to be very, very real time.
Thank you, Ankit. I'm going to ask the same question to Abraham. From a people management perspective, what could be potentially defined as the next management breakthrough?
That's a very difficult question. I think a lot of things are changing, so management styles and management breakthroughs also have to change. You know, I was reading somewhere that the automation that is coming up in the industry one day will replace many people. So then somebody is going to sit and ask, who are we managing? Because it's very easy for robots to do the job. There are no appraisals needed. There are no employee engagement needed. There is no salary increments and, you know, those kind of debates happening in the organizations, and they are available 24/7.
Great.
No leaves, nothing, right? So then what happens? So I think, you know, so till that point, I think we will have to keep evolving our styles to meet the expectation of the people. And as is rightly said, it's about course correction every day. Like I mentioned in the morning, in our organization, it's inspiring great performance every day. So as you see something, you need to give feedback, both positive and, you know, developmental, and keep building on that journey.
Thank you, Abraham. Over to you, Radha.
Sure. So this is something we've actually talked a lot about, because as our organizations get more and more matrixed, get more and more global, less hierarchical, and our teams are almost to some extent becoming somewhat self-governing, if you think about it. So then you really start questioning, like, what's really the role of the manager in this equation? And I really agree with Ankit that this is, the manager's job isn't anymore about, just like not giving you feedback in time and not staying on top of sort of helping you get better. It's really, and I also agree with what you said, which is about like manager's job is to get out of the way while the team gets their things done. So in that sense, like teams are almost becoming self-governing. So the idea of how you be an exceptional team player and help steer it and demonstrate leadership within the team starts becoming really important. The other thing is a lot of us have talked about feedback. So I always see sort of the shoe on the other foot, which is how good are you at asking for feedback and accepting the feedback? That's where always the challenge happens, and the manager becomes like the bad guy or gal who's giving the feedback, whereas the person who's receiving it is just like, well, I'm the victim. No, I mean, this is the evolution. If we're doing 1,000 likes a day on articles we read and dislikes and expressions, well, it's the same thing about the work that we do. So if you're thinking about when I think of sort of evolution of management and evolution of teams, I'm thinking self-governing teams, and I'm thinking continuous feedback about how the work is going. So that means you have to be sort of really open and receptive to making changes and being agile.
Thank you, Radha.
Vasudha, just a timekeeping.
That will be Shrikant's closing thoughts on what could be the next management breakthrough.
I think what I'd like to kind of close up with is primarily saying technology is moving very fast. We know that. We keep pushing our teams to move faster, keep going at whatever pace is expected. But I think we should take a pause, because a lot of times the innovation that we're trying to come up with or newer ideas that we're coming up with have basically no impact on human life. Okay? We're saying robots for this, robots for that, robots for that. But at a time, we need to take a pause, think back on whether what we're building, what we're actually doing is going to make a difference. I mean, I want to have one quotation, very small quotation. I was reading this, that Norway had a movie that was about a train going from point A to point B for 16 hours. And the movie was just tracking what the train was doing for 16 hours. And I believe it had humongous viewership. So it's important for us to slow down, at the same time figuring out what those creative innovations are that will make a difference. That's pretty much.
Thank you, Shrikant. Thank you, panelists. So I'm not going to add anything more to this because you heard a lot from the experts. But we have probably 2 or 3 minutes for a quick Q&A. So if somebody can pass the microphone around. I'm going to play Arnab here. Let's imagine it's the news hour, okay?
Hello. Hello. So which means you're not going to allow them to ask questions? Is that what it means?
I will decide.
Okay. But the nation wants to know.
The nation's right here. So that also I will decide.
Right, I'll straight jump onto my question. My name is Tiyasha, and what I want
Who
to
is your
know
question
is
for?
For anybody who can, volunteer to answer.
Okay.
So the question is that how do you, if at all it is possible, to retain talent for an older technology that is still making money for the business?
I think I'll have Shrikant answer that. Since you used the word older technology and legacy systems, which she spoke about, not just because of that, it's because of the valuable experience he brings in.
That's okay. I'm okay with that question.
Thank you.
All right. So I think this is a challenge for a lot of organizations. And I think it's important for us to start to realize that if people focus entirely on technology alone, then you're not going to keep them motivated. I think it's important for us to, first of all, give them a perspective on the business, which is why I said everybody needs to be multifaceted. It's not about just technology. It's about business models. It's about what the business perspective is. Somebody talked about saying the big picture needs to be explained to those folks. But at the same time, if they have the urge and the energy to explore other areas, we should give them opportunities within the organization to be able to do that. Whether that means 20% time, whether that means over and above what they do, whatever it is. But I think it's important to keep them motivated by not curbing the other instincts that they have to explore. I think the opportunities for exploration exist, then I don't think people have a problem with doing the mundane. Even in newer technologies, I think a lot of people do mundane jobs and get bored. Their creative urge is not satisfied. I think for all of these folks, I think the organizations need to cater to some form of creative release.
So this creative release and the urge to satiate that, I think Ankit has something to add to that.
Yeah, so I think...
So you're getting 2 answers, okay?
No, so I think I'll just add like 30 seconds to that. So if people start understanding the impact of their work and not just the technology they're working on, or not just the impact, the business impact, but how is it impacting the world? There could be so many old technologies. The railways is the oldest technology possible in India right now, but millions of people work in that technology and it's impacting the country in a big way. So I think for all employees to know the end impact of their work is very, very important.
Hi, good morning. So my name is Raman. I work for Oracle, and my question is, how do I remove the years of experience from a job description and still get a good hire? And the second part is, how does the idea of millennial managers for millennials and Gen X managers for Gen X work out?
So we'll take that in 2 parts. Radha, would you like to answer the first part, and I'll have Abraham answer the second part.
Sure, I feel like I'm going to start selling T-shirts that said millennials are people too kind of thing. So how do you remove the years of work experience? I actually believe that it's a pretty archaic construct and over time needs to go away.
because years of experience doesn't mean as much as quality of experience or what you're really looking for to fill the role. So in my opinion, I think if there's you as employees and if there are any HR people in the house should really be challenging yourselves to ask, why do we really need this? I've seen people with very few years of experience who've done some outstanding quality work, and vice versa, people with lots of years of experience who've just done terrible work from a, from a needs fitment kind of aspect. And as far as millennials go and Gen X, it's less about.
Rather, sorry to interrupt. That part was for Abraham.
Oh, sorry.
Remember, I said I'll play Arnab.
You're right. Go for it.
Can you just repeat
So it's about Gen X managing Gen X, millennials managing millennials.
Right. Yeah, I mean, so continuing from that element of that, so the experience doesn't matter any longer, right? So some of the apps that come, I struggle, but my son gets it very quickly. So with all my experience, I still struggle. So experience doesn't matter, right? So it's the capability which matters. And if that is true, then millennials can manage millennials. It's just the capability of the person that matters. And so most of the organizations are now really thinking very hard on looking at capability as the main criteria than the traditional way of saying experience, qualification, X number of months in the role and stuff like that to be an eligible candidate for promotions and stuff. Did I answer?
Thank you,
In fact,
Abraham.
at Flipkart, we had a lot of millennials manage Gen X people as well. So.
Oh, that's an awesome situation to be in. In the interest of time, we can take one question, and our panelists are going to be around. You can always have offline discussions with them and have your questions for them. I can take one question.
So my question is that many of the companies now have done away with the annual rating. So nobody gets a rating, nobody's A, B, C or whatever needs improvement. So what do you think about that? And would you like to adopt that in your own organizations? That's it.
Who would you like to address that question
Whoever
to? Is talking about feedback, and I think
so this is not about feedback. Let me be very clear here. This is not feedback.
It's about the appraisal system.
It's about the rating being done away with. So what do you think about it, and do you want to adopt that in your organization? This is nothing to do about feedback. That can be happening all year through.
Okay, I can start. So from an SAP standpoint, from 2017, we have no ratings. We've already done it. So.
Radha?
So for us, it's still an active discussion. I don't know that we've evolved as far as to say we won't have any ratings yet, but it is a very active discussion about even the whole appraisal, annual performance review process. Most of the employees, nobody wants really that approach anymore. So it's really a question of how do you then provide avenues for feedback, avenues for progression, and when an opportunity comes up, how do you determine who's really qualified and what's the right way to do it? Unfortunately, in the past, that's the mechanism that's been in place, and it's a tremendous sort of change that has to happen, both with our systems as well as with the people who have to implement this change and to ensure that there's a level of unbiasedness to this approach. So yeah, it's work in progress is what I'd like to say.
So Ananya, in short, your answer is legacy on the right and moves down to innovation and more innovation and something that's been done away with. Thank you, panelists, and thank you for being such a wonderful audience.